Welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about the Frontier Alchemist, as it's been translated so far, or Henkyo no Renkinjutsushi in Japanese, which translates to basically Renkinjutsushi being alchemist, and Henkyo meaning frontier, obviously, or remote region slash borderland. Those are all the three translations through the word to the exact same word. There are a couple else, but these are the most common, depending on the kanji construction, obviously. So let's get into it. The basics. The Frontier Alchemist is originally a novel. Now, bear in mind that it's very annoying to find information on novels. So take this with a certain grain of salt, if you will. According to my research, it's a web novel that began in 2020. And it has been adapted into a manga in 2021, basically 1 year later. And I can't find the exact dates, like the exact month and day. So that's pretty much like what I can give you about the dates. Both the novel and manga are written by Otete Ponta, and apparently, so far, this is his only work. There isn't anything else listed under his name or pseudonym. The novel's artist, which probably illustrates the cover and some artwork within, I couldn't. I found artwork for the covers, but I didn't really bother searching for artwork for within because I don't know, like if this is your first time listening to something about a novel or if you're already familiar with it. But either way, if you're already familiar with it, I'm not gonna bother. You already know how it works. But if you're not familiar with novels, basically, sometimes they introduce artworks within the pages, like after a certain chapter, after a certain number of pages, or like to illustrate a certain character. Red Zero has these things, among other novels like the Dungeon Inn, and many other novels actually work this way. And so the artist that actually covers the artwork for the novel is Mataichi Mataro. He also works on many other novels that I'm not gonna list it at this point, but yeah, like a couple of other novels actually. The manga artist is a different person, obviously. In this case, it's identified as Guntao. And up to this date, the novel reached chapter 459, and it pretty much consists of around 2 to 3 paragraphs, weekly, I presume. On the other hand, the manga reached chapter 22, and each chapter averaged 15 pages. Some chapters have more than others, that's why I'm saying an average, because especially because some chapters were merged into one, depending on where you're reading it. Like some fan subs, they merged, like for example, chapter 15, part 1 and part 2. It's only like chapter 15. So these chapters might range from 33 to 39 pages, and that's pretty much the basics. The plot in itself, like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's not amazing. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say it's wow. It's like it blew my mind or really caught me. It's another choice. If I'm not appreciated here, I'm gonna go somewhere else. which is actually very common nowadays. Many mangas slash novels are coming out with that sort of plot. And the story pretty much centers on Rust, the main character, air quotes main character, which is an alchemist working for the Royal Academy. He's being pushed over by other alchemists within the academy who tend to belittle him, and everyone else who's pretty much hierarchically below him. You know, like not the headmaster, or as in the I don't know, the I can't give the specifics as in which is the position from the character doing this. If you read the manga or if you read the novel, you're gonna know who I'm talking about. But yeah, they never, at least where I'm at, they never said, the author never informed which is the position from this alchemist that's above, supposedly above Rust. It's typical public servant, in other words. Just belittling the guy who's actually doing the work, doing all the things. And one day, bear in mind, this is in the very first chapter, as I usually mention, the higher ups decide to cut his research department's funding to zero. Like, he's not gonna get any funding. And that triggers a very expected reaction on Rust. So basically, he goes like, well, I'm out. Oh, you can't leave? Really? Watch me. Watch my ass leave. Now that I get to think about it, it's pretty much capitalism in a nutshell. But yeah, it's not like he doesn't have something in mind. He does this like knowing what he's doing. He has been invited to work for the newly formed state that someone who studied with him in his earlier in his life pretty much founded. And that someone is his kind of friend. I don't know if you could call childhood friend, but at the very least, academy friend, Kalin. And as it is expected, as soon as he leaves the academy, everything within the academy starts to crumble. Starts falling apart, because it's obviously it was Rust that kept the department functioning. Then the very common sort of, yeah, I make things work around here kind of trope in manga or in novels. Uh, but on Rust's side, on the other hand, as soon as he departs, he begins changing the surroundings, around him, and developing connections with nearby countries in order to increase Khan's state's influence in terms of economy, power, influence, etc. Which is like he solves like a small, let's say a small quest slash crisis in a village nearby concerning these those power crystals, or whatever it is that they called, that power the engines for these magical weapons and so on. And as far as characters goes, Rust is the male lead, which specializes in obviously alchemy. And as far as the author as drawn, or as the manga has gone, he can use scrolls to perform what the author defines as magic, as well as summon what Rust calls transmuted beasts, among other things. And the first transmuted beast being Hippo, and which is like a travel beast. He uses it for, obviously, to move around, like a car, per se, or like, well, like horses and giraffes and etc. and camels. I don't know if giraffes were used, but yeah, you get the gist of the thing. And the other one is Rose, which is basically a rose that he transmuted, and she can use her roots to make things. Like she can basically hemp, let's say, you know. The other character that I want to talk about, which is important in my opinion, it's distinctive within the manga, is obviously Kalin. She's a warrior s, I guess. That would be the correct term. And she's basically regarded as a war hero. Therefore the higher ups rewarded her the land to rule over. She became like a feudal lord or a knight under a feudal lord per se. And that's where it all begun. She's relatively small if you compare her to the other characters. However, she boasts superhuman strength. Like she's really strong. She can wield a really strong blade and cleave foes. And this is where things get interesting, in my opinion, in the manga, or at least what the author tried to work with. As she's small and light, and Russ explains this. I'm gonna show on the screen, but he explains that in a chapter that she lacks mass, right? She's light, she's small and light, so she can't perform heavy blows, or at least in theory. But that's where both her weapon and armor come in hand. She wears a black, heavy-looking plate armor-ish, which increases her mass, basically her weight, and allowing her to absolutely devastate things around her, like deal really heavy blows. And it makes sense because in terms of physics, force equals mass times acceleration. So she increased her mass, therefore she increased her force, right? The product of her increased mass times her acceleration is increased force. She used a shortcut. So I think that's really freaking cool in the manga that the author does, and it's really good. The novel too, obviously, but in the manga it's very obvious. And I'm not gonna get into the other chapters and or in which chapter this happens or how. Like I'm gonna leave you guessing, but if you're interested, please read the works because so far I think it's worth it. I'm gonna explain the conclusion why, but yeah, I think it's pretty good if you're waiting on other things. The art is it works for the story. In my opinion, the artwork is secondary to the story, right? Unless it ultimately relies on its look, like a mature work, with gorgeous bodies, or if the artist is very famous for having really cool art, as some artists already mentioned on my previous videos that I'm talking about on a regular basis, and they rely on their artwork for attraction, like the dungeoning thing that I was talking about, like the guy sets a dungeon an inn in a dungeon island, and he sleeps with a lot of women, so that kind of relies on looks, right? The art. This one, it relies more on plot, I guess. And just as an example, books usually don't have artwork within them, and yet you have many irrefutable, huge success franchises like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. So there's that. My only beef though with the art in the manga is that it can be very confusing at times. Uh, Especially when Rust is using his scrolls or when other characters are using air quotes alchemy. So far, from what I've seen, maybe there can be other things in the future, but yeah, so far with alchemy, I think the scenes they become too messy. You have a lot of these things going on, and they try to mingle alchemy with real life elements of chemistry, and it's just it doesn't work from time to time. It's not something major. It's not something that I would say, oh, damn. But yeah, at least in my opinion, I kind of felt like, okay, this scene doesn't work. But it's good. In all, I think the art is very good. The women are gorgeous. The way Rust is portrayed is pretty good. The way the characters are portrayed are good. Like the lines are good. The artists are amazing. And well, to sum it up, if you want to enjoy so far from what I've read, light reading, adventure themed with magical elements, a manga or novel, if that's your thing, then I do recommend this work, The Frontier Alchemist, because it easily fills the waiting time between chapters, of other works that you're following or anime that you're watching. So I do think it's good. I think it's a good read. It's not amazing. It's not something I'd say, but that's actually, to be very honest, that's a very tall order so far for me. But it's pretty good. I think that the majority of people are gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna think like, okay, yeah, I can read this. Like it's cool. And that's it for this video. And I hope you're having a good one. And I'll see you next time.